I was in the garage when it happened, not doing anything important. Just organizing the fishing rods I'd been meaning to sort since April, moving things around the way you do when retirement gives you too much time and not enough purpose. The radio was on, some AM station playing old country I wasn't really listening to. My coffee had gone cold on the workbench. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my daughter-in-law, Simone. "Hi Al, just wanted to reach out. We love having you close by. And we really appreciate everything you've done for us and the boys. But Nora feels like this Christmas should just be immediate family. Her side, you know. She's been planning it for months, and she wants it to be more intimate. We hope you understand. Maybe we can do something with you the week after." I read it twice, then a third time. Nora. That was my son Marcus's mother-in-law, Simone's mother. A woman I had met maybe 8 or 9 times in 4 years. Always at the kids' birthday parties, always pleasant enough on the surface, always with that particular kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. I set the phone face down on the workbench next to the cold coffee. I didn't respond right away. I've learned, after 63 years of making mistakes and occasionally learning from them, that the worst thing you can do when you're blindsided is react immediately. So I just stood there for a while, holding a fishing rod I had no memory of picking up, listening to a song I didn't know on the radio. What I kept coming back to was this. 3 months ago, I had co-signed the loan for the house they were living in. Not a small thing, not a symbolic gesture. My name was on the paperwork at the bank. I had sat across from the loan officer at the credit union on Millbrook Road and signed my name to $340,000 because my son and his wife were $3,000 short on their debt-to-income ratio and the bank wouldn't approve them without a co-signer with clean credit. I had done it without hesitation. I had driven home that afternoon feeling genuinely happy, and now Nora felt like Christmas should be intimate. I'm not going to pretend I handled the next few hours gracefully. I walked around the garage for a while. I went inside and stood at the kitchen window, looking at nothing. I thought about calling my son Marcus directly, but something stopped me. I think I already knew that if I pushed him into a corner, he'd side with his wife, and I didn't want to make him choose. Not yet. I thought about my wife, Patricia. She passed 4 years ago, just 14 months before Marcus and Simone got married, which means she never met Simone's family properly, never had to navigate any of this. I used to think that was sad. Standing in my kitchen that afternoon, I thought maybe she was the lucky one. I finally responded to Simone that evening. "Understood. Thank you for letting me know." That was all. She sent back a heart emoji. I put the phone in my pocket and went to bed at 8:30, which is something I only do when I'm trying to avoid thinking. I should tell you something about Marcus before I go further, because he matters in all of this more than anyone. He's 41 years old, my son. He works in commercial insurance, which is exactly as unglamorous as it sounds, and he's good at it, methodical, patient, detail-oriented. He got those things from his mother. From me, he got his stubbornness, his tendency to go quiet when he's uncomfortable, and a bad habit of avoiding difficult conversations until they become unavoidable. We were close when he was growing up, not in a buddy-buddy way, not the kind of father who coached every little league team and chaperoned every field trip. I worked construction management for 30 years, long hours, sometimes out of town for weeks at a stretch. But we had something real between us. I taught him to fish out at Lake Hinckley. We drove to see the Steelers 3 or 4 times when he was a teenager. When Patricia got sick, it was Marcus who flew home and slept on the couch for 2 weeks, not because anyone asked him to, but because he knew. After the wedding, things shifted. Not dramatically, not in any one moment you could point to. It was gradual, the way water changes things. Slowly, then completely. Simone is fine. I want to be clear about that. She's not a bad person. She's pleasant with me. She keeps the boys well. She makes Marcus happy in the ways that count. But she is deeply, fundamentally attached to her mother, Nora, in a way that I have never fully understood. Nora had opinions about the wedding venue, about where they bought their first house, about how the boys were being raised, about which pediatrician they used, and Simone received these opinions not as interference but as guidance, which I suppose is a distinction that matters. I was always on the outside of that. I didn't fight it. That's not my style, and honestly, Patricia had warned me long before she died. She had a sense for these things that I never did. Don't compete with her mother. she had told me once, not unkindly. You won't win, and you'll just push Marcus away trying. So I hadn't competed. I had shown up when I was invited. I had fixed the back fence and recaulked the upstairs bathroom, and spent 2 full Saturdays helping them build the deck off the kitchen. I had co-signed a $340,000 loan, and I had not said a word about any of it. The Christmas text was, in some ways, the natural conclusion of a pattern that had been building for years, but knowing that didn't make it easier to sit with. The week after the text, Marcus called. Not to apologize, not to explain. He called to ask if I could come by Saturday to help him figure out why the garage door opener had stopped working. I said sure, I'd come by Saturday. We spent 2 hours on the garage door. It turned out to be a simple sensor alignment issue. 15 minutes of actual work, padded out by the way men extend tasks when they want to be in the same space without having to talk directly about anything. We drank beer afterward in the driveway, watching the boys ride their bikes in circles on the cul-de-sac. Jackson was 7 and Eli was 5, and they were the reason I had not, after receiving Simone's text, simply driven home to Pittsburgh, where my sister lives, and let the whole situation sort itself out without me. Those 2 boys. That's all I need to say. I waited until Marcus had finished half his beer. So, I said, Christmas. He went quiet, the particular Marcus quiet, jaw tightening slightly, eyes on the middle distance. Simone talked to you, he said. Not a question. She texted me. Yeah. Dad, it's just, Nora has this whole thing planned. She rented a cabin up in the Poconos for the whole family. It's a big production. Simone's been looking forward to it for months. I'm not upset about the Poconos, I said, which was not entirely true but was the most useful thing I could say. I just want to understand, does Nora have something against me specifically, or is this a general policy? He didn't answer for a moment. She thinks you're around a lot. I live 12 minutes away. I know. I co-signed your mortgage 4 months ago. I know, Dad. He said it in the voice people use when they know something is true, and that's exactly why they don't want to discuss it. I let it go. I watched Jackson narrowly avoid riding into a neighbor's mailbox. I finished my beer. On the drive home, I did something I had been turning over in my mind for 10 days. I called my real estate agent. Her name is Beverly Cho, and she's been selling houses in this part of central New Jersey for 22 years. She sold me the condo I moved into after Patricia died, and before that she helped me buy the house in Haddonfield that I raised Marcus in. She's direct in the way I like. No soft peddling, no sales language, just facts and options. I told her what I was looking for. Millbrook Commons, I said. The development where my son lives. I want to know if anything's available, on his street or as close as possible. There was a pause. Ow, she said, in the tone she uses when she wants to make sure she has understood correctly. You want to buy a house on your son's street? If there's something available, yes. Another pause. There's actually a listing that came up 10 days ago, 4 doors down from them, same side of the street. It's a 3-bed, dated kitchen, needs some cosmetic work. Prisked at 310. Can we see it this week? I can make that happen. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in my condo listening to the heating system click and thought about whether I was being unreasonable, whether this was, as the more skeptical version of myself kept suggesting, exactly the kind of overcorrection that would make everything worse. A 63-year-old man buying a house on his son's street because his son's mother-in-law didn't want him at Christmas. Objectively, I could see how it looked. But here's what I kept coming back to. I wasn't doing it to make a point in Nora. I wasn't doing it out of spite, or wounded pride, or some need to win. I was doing it because of Jackson getting up early on Saturday mornings to knock on my condo door, asking if I wanted to watch cartoons. I was doing it because of Eli, who had my wife's eyes and who I barely saw except when I was specifically invited. I was doing it because I was 63 years old, and my wife was gone, and my son was drifting, and those 2 boys were the best thing in my life. And Nora, or no Nora, I was not going to spend Christmas alone in a condo in Flemington. While they were 12 minutes away, I saw the house that Thursday. I made an offer Friday. I closed 6 weeks later. I did not tell Marcus. I want to be honest about that. I signed the papers. I got the keys. I started having some work done, refinishing the hardwood floors. updating the bathroom fixtures, repainting the interior, and I did not tell my son that I had bought a house 4 doors down from him. I told my sister in Pittsburgh, who said, "Oh, ow," in a tone that contained roughly equal measures of understanding and concern. I told Beverly, who laughed and said she'd seen stranger things and wished me luck. And I told my old friend Dwight from my construction days, who said that's either the smartest or the dumbest thing you've ever done, and either way I respect it. It took about 3 weeks for the neighborhood to notice. This is what happens in cul-de-sacs. People pay attention to construction vans and fresh paint, especially in a development where all the houses look more or less the same, and any variation registers. One evening in early December, I was in the new house directing the floor guys on a stain color when my phone rang. Marcus. I picked up. Dad. His voice had a particular quality I recognized. Not angry, not quite. More like a man trying to solve a math problem he didn't expect to encounter. My neighbor Ted just told me that the guy buying the Reinhardt house is my dad. Is that true? I closed last month, I said. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear him breathing. You bought a house on my street. 4 doors down, yes. Without, you didn't tell me. I was going to tell you when it was ready. I wanted to have it livable first. Dad. He stopped. Started again. Does Simo know? I imagine Ted told her around the same time he told you. Another silence. I waited. I had rehearsed this conversation approximately 100 times in my head over the past 6 weeks, and what I had decided was that I was going to stay calm and not be defensive. I had done nothing wrong. I had purchased a house on a public street in a free country. I had not done it to bother anyone. I had done it because I wanted to be near my grandchildren, and I was not going to apologize for that. I don't understand, Marcus finally said. What part? All of it. Why didn't you tell me? Why here? There are developments all over this area. This is where you are, I said, and I want to be near Jackson and Eli. That's the whole reason, Marcus. That's the only reason. I heard him exhale. Simone's not going to. This is going to be complicated, Dad. I know. But I'm not here to make anyone's life complicated. I'm here because I'm their grandfather, and because they matter to me more than my own comfort, and because I don't have that many years left when they're going to want to spend time with me. I'm not asking for anything except to be nearby. He didn't say anything after that. We said goodbye in the careful way that means the conversation isn't over, just paused. The week before Christmas, Simone came to the door. I had been expecting her. I had spent 2 weeks making the house presentable, new throw rugs, a decent couch I found at a consignment place in Princeton, the boys' names written in pine cone letters that I hung on the front door, the way Patricia used to do with the kids' names when they were young. Simone stood on the front step with her arms crossed, and I could see she had been thinking carefully about what she was going to say. She's not a confrontational person, Simone. That's one of the things I've always respected about her. I want to understand your thinking, she said. Come in, I said. I'll make coffee. She came in. She looked around, not critically, more like someone trying to locate herself in a situation she hadn't anticipated. She sat at the kitchen table, and I made coffee, and I let her talk. She said she felt blindsided. She said her mother was upset. She said Marcus was stuck in the middle. She said she didn't know what the right boundaries were anymore, and she felt like the rules kept changing. I listened to all of it. Then I said, Simone, can I ask you something honestly? She nodded. If my wife were still alive, and you had moved to this neighborhood, and she found out there was a house 4 doors away from her grandchildren, would she have bought it? She thought about it for a moment. Probably, she said, quietly. Your mother has been to this house twice, I said, for birthday parties. I have been here dozens of times. I fixed your fence. I built your deck. I co-signed your mortgage so you could live here. I'm not saying that to hold it over you. I'm saying it because I want you to understand that I'm not a stranger to this family, even if your mother sees me that way. I paused. I didn't buy this house to cause problems. I bought it because those boys are the best part of my life, and I wasn't willing to let geography and scheduling become reasons I barely see them. Simone looked at the table for a moment. Nora thinks you did it to undermine her. I did it because I love my grandchildren, I said. What Nora thinks about it is between Nora and Nora. Something shifted in Simone's face then, not dramatically. Just a small, almost imperceptible relaxation around the eyes. She drank her coffee. We talked for another 20 minutes about the boys. Eli's reading, Jackson's obsession with building things, the soccer league they were starting in the spring. Normal conversation. The kind we might have had if none of the preceding months had happened. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. The pine cone letters are nice, she said. Patricia used to do them, I said. She would have liked that the boys' names are up there. Simone nodded. Merry Christmas, Al. Merry Christmas, Al. Merry Christmas. I spent Christmas alone that year. I want to be clear about that. I'm not going to tell you some neat story where everything reversed itself in time for the holiday, where Nora had a change of heart and they knocked on my door Christmas morning and we all sat around a table together. That's not what happened. They went to the Poconos. I made myself a decent roast chicken, called my sister, watched a football game. It was fine. Quiet, but fine. What happened was slower and in some ways more real because of that. Jackson discovered I was 4 houses away approximately 48 hours after I moved in. He showed up at my door on a Saturday morning. It was still December, cold, him in a puffy coat with the zipper broken and knocked 3 times with both fists the way kids knock when they're excited. Grandpa Al, he said, you live here now. I do, I said. Can I come in? You can always come in. That was how it started. He came by 2 or 3 times a week after school or on weekends, usually without asking permission because he was 7 and proximity made permission feel unnecessary. Then Eli started coming too, the 2 of them appearing at my door in the afternoons, like small, cheerful ambassadors from a country I had been homesick for. I taught Jackson how to use a handsaw on a scrap of lumber. I started reading to Eli after school on Tuesdays. I started showing up at their soccer games, sitting on the far end of the bleachers with my thermos of coffee, not making a big production of it, just being there. Simone never told me not to come. Nora came to visit in February. I was in the driveway the afternoon she arrived, unloading bags of topsoil I was going to use for a raised garden bed. I'd been planning since January. She got out of her car and saw me and the whole geography of the situation. The house, the boys' names on the door, the fact of my presence. 4 doors from her daughter's home seemed to land on her all at once in a way it hadn't before. She walked toward me. I put down the bag of topsoil. We had never had a direct conversation in 4 years. Everything had always been mediated, through Simone, through Marcus, through the buffer of birthday parties and holiday gatherings, where we circled each other politely. You're not going to go away, she said. Not an accusation, more like a realization she was thinking through out loud. No, I said, I'm not. She looked at the house, then at me. The boys seem happy you're here. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here. There was a long pause. I didn't try to fill it. I'm not a bad person, she finally said. I just want what's best for my daughter. So do I said. And I want what's best for those boys. I don't think that has to be a conflict. She didn't respond to that. She turned and walked back towards Simone's house. But right before she reached the front walk, she stopped once more. You should come to Easter, she said, without turning around. The boys keep asking about you. She went inside before I could say anything. Easter was crowded and loud and slightly awkward in all the ways these things are when the map of a family is still being redrawn. Nora was there. We were mostly cordial. We did not have a breakthrough moment. No tearful apology, no reconciliation scene. We passed dishes around the table. I helped Jackson find eggs in the backyard after dinner. Nora watched and didn't say anything. It was enough. Marcus and I have been slowly finding our way back to something real. It started in March when he came by on a Saturday morning with 2 coffees and sat at my kitchen table and said, without much preamble, that he was sorry for not handling things better. He didn't elaborate. I didn't need him to. We sat there for an hour and talked about the Steelers and a commercial property deal he was working on, and whether my raised garden beds were going to produce anything useful this summer. And it was the most like ourselves we had been in years. "I know you bought this house for the boys," he said at some point. "I bought it for all of you," I said. "But yeah, mostly the boys." He nodded. "Patricia would have done the same thing. I know she would have, in half the time." He laughed. "A real one, the one that sounds like him. I think about her a lot, in this house, more than I did in the condo, which always felt like a waiting room between one life and something I hadn't figured out yet. This house feels like something. Not the house I raised Marcus in, not a replacement for anything. Something new, something I built for the next part." On Tuesday afternoons, Eli sits at my kitchen table and we read together. Right now we're working through a box set of the original Hardy Boys that I found at a yard sale in October. The actual old hardcovers with the orange spines, the same ones I read as a kid. He holds the books with both hands. He sounds out the words he doesn't know. Sometimes he falls asleep in the reading chair before we finish a chapter, and I just let him sleep for a while before I call Simone to come get him. These are the moments I bought the house for. Not to win anything, not to prove a point, not to beat Nora at whatever game she thought we were playing, just for a Tuesday afternoon in November, with a 5-year-old asleep in a reading chair, and the sound of the heating system ticking on, and the orange-spined books stacked on the table, and the knowledge that I am, for the first time in a long time, exactly where I am supposed to be. My son is 4 doors away. My grandchildren come to my door with both fists. I'm not going anywhere. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually means to fight for something. Not fight in the loud way, not arguments at dinner tables, not ultimatums, not the kind of confrontation that leaves everyone worse off and nothing actually resolved. I mean the quieter kind of fight, the kind where you make a decision, absorb the discomfort of it, and just keep showing up. When Simone sent me that text, my first instinct was to shrink. That's honest. There's something about being told you're not wanted that reaches a very specific place in a person, past the pride, past the reasoning, right down to the part of you that's still 10 years old and just wants to belong somewhere. I felt that. I sat with it for days. But here's what I've come to understand about moments like that one. The way you respond to being pushed out tells you more about yourself than almost anything else. You can accept the diminishment as permanent. You can argue and make it about ego. Or you can look at what you actually value, not what you think you should value, not what looks good from the outside, but what genuinely matters to you, and act from that place instead. For me, it was always Jackson and Eli. That was never complicated. The minute I got clear on that, everything else simplified. What I did, buying that house, wasn't a power move. It wasn't retaliation. I want to be honest about that, because I think it matters. My motives weren't clean and strategic, the way they sound in retrospect. I was a 63-year-old widower who missed his grandchildren and refused to let distance, manufactured or otherwise, become a permanent condition. That's all it was. The intelligence of the decision, if there was any, came from knowing myself well enough to act on what I actually needed, rather than on what I was told I deserved. Nora is not a villain in the way it might seem. She loves her daughter. She loves those boys. She was protecting something, even if her methods were the kind that damage the things they're meant to protect. I don't carry anger toward her. What she did set something in motion that turned out to be the best decision I've made since Patricia died. In that sense, I suppose I owe her something, the thing about integrity, real integrity, the kind that costs you something, is that it requires you to behave according to your values, even when no one is watching and no one will reward you for it. I didn't tell Marcus I was buying that house. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a speech. I just did the thing that was true to what I believed, and I let the consequences come. They weren't all easy. Some of them still aren't. But Eli is 6 now, and he falls asleep in my reading chair on Tuesday afternoons, and Marcus drove over last Saturday with 2 coffees, and we sat at my kitchen table and talked like ourselves. That didn't happen because I won anything. It happened because I stayed. I refused to become an absence. I showed up, quietly, consistently, with no guarantee that it would ever be enough. That is the only lesson I know how to offer from any of this. Not a formula, not a strategy. Just this: decide what you love, then act like it. The rest has a way of following,